Hello and welcome to this mini masterclass on pursuing ERG success through metrics and finding that sustainability as well. This class actually focuses on finding joy in ERG data. Why? Well, not only because it's my middle name, but also because we need it to sustain us as ERG leaders. Oftentimes, we have this subconscious belief that if bigotry against our community still exists within the company, if those microaggressions are still happening, then we haven't succeeded. We haven't done our job, right? We haven't reached the end of the marathon. And it's time for us to find that thought if it exists within us and to deconstruct it because it's not possible for a single ERG to be able to take care of all of the microaggressions and bigotry that has been going on for hundreds of years. But what the amazing part is that for me, the best way to replace that thought of if it exists, then I haven't succeeded at my job as ERG leader is to switch to finding the joy in the metrics. If I set up my program the right way at the beginning of the year, and when it's done through a framework of finding joy, we are able to use the metrics that we kind of have to track anyway and find joy within them because we're going to set sustainable, feasibly to achieve objectives for the year. We're going to choose metrics that are going to measure if those objectives are successful or not. And through those metrics, we're going to be able to see progress. We're going to be able to see proof that we are doing something good in our world, that we, with all this energy and time and money that's going into these ERGs and the work that we're doing within the ERGs, we can see that we're actually making a difference. It gives a sense of purpose, as well as a sense of connection and community with everyone working on those objectives through those strategies. So you are going to find little moment pop-ups of joy throughout this presentation. You're going to see them in orange, so they're going to stand out a little bit. And that's where I'm trying to call out, like, this is a key part of how we find joy in the metrics. Now, first, I invite you to use your phone, scan the QR code, and take the one question pre-event survey. This actually flows into the entire project that we are doing today. So we'll be doing a post-event survey at the end, and we're gonna be talking about this throughout the webinar today. So let's get into it. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to take that. If you haven't, please pause the video now, go answer that one question, and then come back. One thing we need to clarify before we get started, by the way, I put this picture in there for a reason to remind me to say this disclaimer. So I work with all of the ERGs. I'm an ERG Success support consultant for many different companies. I also work very specifically with Pride ERGs as they have some unique experiences, as well as I'm a part of the community and can speak that language of how do we call in those executives that have not bought into how important having a functioning Pride ERG is. Okay, so a lot of both the examples, the case studies that I'm sharing today are LGBTQ plus ERGs. I am going to leave it up to you to be able to change those situations to apply to your community. But that's the only place where the data is very specific to the LGBTQ plus community, because the rest of everything I'm sharing with you today is applicable to all the ERGs, including this slide, where we first need to determine, are we an ERG or a BRG? So employee resource groups, like the name implies, are focused on the employee, and traditionally they are meant to provide that safe space at work so that no one feels like they're the only one in the room. That even if they are the majority of time at work, if they're the only person of color on their team, if they're the only queer person in their department, when there's an ERG around that identity, they have a regular place to be with coworkers at work, but not be the only one in the room, right? Now, the other setup is a BRG, or a business resource group. And like the name implies, this means the group is there to serve the business, to be a resource for the business. And so they might provide their community's perspectives on different things like marketing or social media, as well as company policies that they're trying to work out, as well as they're often tasked with providing education to increase the allyship skills among their coworkers. Now, if you don't know which one you are, or if you're saying, we do both of those, you're in good company because 90% of the ERGs that I work with really are a conglomeration of those two. And however, if it's not recognized, if it's not being intentional, you can get 6 months into the year and start having issues with different leadership and who's asking for the metrics and why are they asking for the metrics. And if you start to feel like you're hitting a lot of roadblocks, come back to the slide and see if you can create some clarification here around the expectations, and that might help clear the roadblocks that you've got going on. Because this is often the source of problems. When I'm working with an ERG or a group of ERGs that are struggling, determining this and getting HR or the DEI department or whoever is over the ERGs, getting everyone on the same page clears up a lot of those problems that I'm called in to help with. So we have to acknowledge the fact, because inclusive leaders acknowledge reality. We have to acknowledge the fact that all metrics, especially ERG metrics in companies, are really based on identification. Now, a lot of people will see risk in identification because our poor HR leaders out there know every time we hire an employee, they're obligated to do a certain amount of identification, right? It's usually either required by law or by the insurance company or by both. And so they have to disclose the sex they were assigned at birth and a few other things. Now, when we can look at this through the lens of inclusive leadership and look for the opportunity when what we see is roadblocks, we see we have an opportunity right from onboarding to start building trust, which is going to allow the self-ID program to be able to be effective. So what I mean by this is we have to go through this identification process and onboarding anyway. It's required for X amount of reasons. So let's start the really transparent communication right from the get-go. Be really clear about who's asking for the information, how much of it is tied to the employee's file, how is it being tracked, why is it being tracked, how could it benefit them, how could it be detrimental to them. When you're thinking about this, and you're probably working with your HR onboarding people around this, because this feeds into the ERG success. And so collaborating with them can increase your success in the near future. Okay. So when we're collaborating with them and we're saying, okay, if they have to do these required forms anyway, let's start establishing that transparency and trust. And when we're doing so, let's think like a new employee who's been out of work, let's say 6 months. They've been killing it trying to get a new job. They finally have one. They're also a person of color, and secretly they're disabled. Think like that person. And now think about the required identification. If we can get them to a point where, one, they feel safe, and two, they feel like if they provide that sensitive information, something will be done with it. Something good will be done with it. It is worth their time to provide that sensitive information. Then when we get to that next step, which most companies call self-ID. So this is where they can self-identify as any of the different communities, right? And most employees will just say, nah, and move on to the rest of their onboarding paperwork. So again, we take that transparent communication that we did when it was required and we use it the exact same way. So now we're being very transparent about, again, who has access to the information, how tied is it to their employee file, why is the information being asked for? How is it going to be used? If they answer, they somehow need to know that if they answer that they do have a disability, one, they need to know that in the future, 2 years from now, if they apply for a promotion, is that potential boss going to see that they have that disability before they even get to interview, right? So that's what they're thinking. So we need to clarify that. We also need to clarify that what we plan to do in the information. So for example, you might give an example of if we find that 20% of our employees have disabilities, that's going to change some of the policies around here. If we find out that 20% of our employees are single parents, that's going to change how some of the ERGs are going to work, right? So explaining to them that this is an opportunity to be able to communicate your identity, claim your identity, and be able to help a work culture build that identity, build with that identity in mind, instead of saying, you're welcome here, everyone is welcome here. But when you're able to share the identity, then we can build the work culture with you in mind. So hopefully that's helpful. I did have one last thing is to make sure that the self-ID is reviewed and updated regularly, because you might not have had a disability last year, but you do this year. You might not have been willing to come out about your gender identity last year, but you are ready to this year, right? So it's important that if we are relying on a self-ID system for the metrics that we need, that we are allowing our people the opportunity to review it and update it regularly. And again, it starts with that safety and trust, huh? So let's get right into these ERG metrics. These are the 4 steps to finding joy in ERG metrics. We're going to flesh them out in the following slides, and then I'm going to present to you 2 different case studies of different ERGs and how they worked through these 4 steps. All right. Step 1, choose that desired impact. Step 2, choose an objective. Y'all can read this. The big point I want to make, metrics are the stats that are used to measure the success of the strategies, not the success or the impact of the ERG. If you are being asked to prove the impact or prove the success of the ERG, that conversation has to start at the very beginning of the year, and everyone needs to be on the same page around what that expectation is. If you're getting to the end of the year and they're asking for your metrics, be very clear that your metrics are measuring the strategies, not the success of the ERG, because everyone's going to have a different definition around what success looks like in an ERG. And every ERG is going to have a different definition of that. All right. Now, desired impact. This is where we have to start, and it's one of the most joyful parts of the experience. We get to get with our membership and really dream about what is the change that we want to see in this world. Is it something to do with our work culture? Is it to do with the world in general? It's a pie in the sky dream. And it gives us quite a few advantages. It paves the way for our executive sponsors and the other higher level executives in the company, right? When we go to them and we ask we need some support or a resource from their department or something, when we can lead with, this is the goal, the desired impact that we're trying to achieve. And when it's something that everyone can get on board with, because everyone wants to see a world where that's the reality, then it helps to pave that way to being able to get what we need, as well as it creates a North Star to create a really cohesive program for an entire year. The fact is when you're trying to run a program for a whole year, as you well know, you get to decision fatigue. You get to a point where you're like, I can't figure out one more event. I can't figure out one more celebration, right? You get to that decision fatigue. When we have a North Star, that creates this cohesiveness that now it's not all the options that you're trying to decide between. Now you're just trying to decide between these options that sustain and pursue that desired impact that lit everyone up at the beginning of the year. And that is number 4. The big reason that one of the big reasons we need this desired impact is we need something big and beautiful that's going to inspire and sustain volunteer passion. I come from a nonprofit background, so I look at ERGs as nonprofits. It's a bunch of volunteers that all come together to create some social change. And so that informs quite a few of the different strategies that I suggest to ERGs. And one of them is, just like a nonprofit has this mission that gets people fired up and they want to pursue that mission and that vision, you need that for your ERG, and that is your desired impact. It's got to be that something that, again, lights everyone up, gets everyone on the same page. Yes, this is what I want to do. Again, it brings that sense of purpose and connection and belonging, which are all of these really beautiful things that tie out to money in the future around talent retention, talent attraction, team productivity, right? We can attach money and dollar signs to all of these things that we're creating through a desired impact. We're creating the sense of purpose and connection and belonging when we can find that desired impact that lights everyone up. Okay. Also, desired impacts are usually not measurable. They are that pie in the sky dream. We can't usually measure if we've gotten them. This next screen is some examples, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I just realized I have my gaming headphones on. I so don't need them. So I'm gonna take them off. I guess I'm just used to being in Zoom rooms with my headphones on. So here's some examples of desired impact. These are different impacts that groups that I've worked with in the last couple of years have used. Now, I don't guide them to really refine the words or to make it sound really pretty or witty. It literally needs to be the words, the grammar, the phrasing that lights the employees up. That's the whole goal, right? So yeah, you're going to see some hanging participles or weird grammar or whatever, and that's absolutely fine because it's customized to almost the energy of that group. I don't try to refine it too much because words don't inspire. It's the energy behind the words that inspire. So we keep it the way it is to really maintain that energy. Okay, so those are some examples. Let's move on to objectives. Once you have that desired impact, now it's time to pick one or two objectives that you're going to use to pursue that desired impact. Now, again, we're just picking one or two. If you don't go to three unless you have at least 50, maybe 75 members, because you need the human power to be able to pursue these objectives without burning anyone out. Because there's no joy in burnout. There's joy in sustainability, though. So being realistic about what we're trying to pursue and making sure that not one person is taking on too heavy of a load is really critical to finding that joy. So let's make sure we're only picking one or two objectives if we have 50 or 75 less members. We want to make sure our objectives are specific. So our desired impact was that pie in the sky dream. It's not as specific. It's not even measurable, right? But it is inspiring. It is joyful. Now these objectives, these are going to be specific. These are going to be able to be measured. We're going to have a finite, did we achieve this objective? And we will know because it's finite, right? So I always say specific, it needs to have strategies that we can apply towards it, and we need to have stats. It needs to be measurable. Now, the key here is to make sure you're picking goals that are feasible to attain by the end of the year if three things happen, if you have three things all on the same page: your executive sponsor, your ERG leaders, and your membership. If they are all excited by that desired impact and they're excited to pursue this objective, then this goal, this objective needs to be able to be attained, right? I hope I'm explaining that correctly. Because as ERG leaders, you are on the front lines of seeing all of the bigotry, of feeling it when your members are feeling it. When the headlines are showing bigotry against your community, you're not only feeling it for yourself, but you're feeling it for your people as well. So we need to make sure that, again, there's this joy and this sustainability. And when we can pick a goal where we can see regular progress is being made, that is what lends to that joy and sustainability as a leader. The world might be going to hell in a handbasket, but you get to, at any point in time, look at your metrics, see that you are making progress and you are making a difference in the world. So basically what I'm saying is don't pick an objective that you're just not sure if you're going to be able to get that or not, right? Give yourself a break. Maybe save that for the day job and not the gay job, the ERG job, sorry. I'm realizing this is not just Pride ERG leaders. All right, so with a clear desired impact and specific objectives, we can find sustainable strategies. Focus on one objective at a time as an entire ERG. Focus on one objective at a time. Break it down into steps and assignments, and then match those assignments to the passions of your members. Again, that's where we're finding that joy and that sustainability. Don't give a data analytics job to someone who loves being the center of attention and would rather be the MC of the event than tracking the data of the event, and vice versa. If you have someone who's like, I'd never want all eyes on me, but I absolutely love to nerd out on data, That's who you ask to be your head of data analytics for that objective on that committee, right? Same thing. You might have someone who isn't a graphic designer, but has always wanted to learn those skills. And so they're volunteering to learn those skills for this specific project. Those are great, right? So match the assignments to your member passions. All right. And now metrics themselves. I've separated these into metrics that can be measured and tracked by the ERGs and the ones that you need to leave on HR's plate or your DI department's plate. It doesn't need to be on ERG leader responsibility. So a few of the metrics that can be tracked, 90% of the ERGs that I work with, the only metric they're tracking is how many people attend events. That's it, which is great. You're going to see that. Event engagement. We need to know about that. But there's so many other things that can be measured and tracked and provided as proof of concept. So we can start with member perception of connection, belonging, or confidence in a specific topic. So just like at the beginning of this meeting, I did a pre-event survey to ask, where do you feel like you are in these skills? Spoiler alert, you're going to have the exact same question at the end of the event. There's going to be a survey, exact same question. Hopefully you will have learned some skills. Hopefully you have already. And hopefully that needle will move. And then the next time that I do this class, I get to say that each participant averages X percentage increase in skills, right? And then we've got impact on internal community. So think about the leadership development that you do in your program, or if you do mentorship, or career development, or internal communications. Is your group being asked to consult on internal communications or company policies? This section, I want you to think of it as work that you're doing for the company that they need done, and you're doing it for them. Your group is doing it for them. So track that and be able to have that data for them, especially at your budget meetings, right? Now, I have in orange here impact assets. So we both know that at some point you're going to have to create a slide deck that shows what your ERG has done or for the past year, right? Setting up for the next year, or the impact that they've had or whatever it might be. So make life easier on yourself and collect impact assets as you are collecting metric data. So for example, with a post-event survey, let's say you did an in-person activity and then you asked everyone on the way out, you had a big QR code and people were scanning that and doing their exit survey. And in it, you allow them to be able to upload photos from the day. So let's say it was an employee carnival, and now they've got all these great photos that came from this event from the ERG, and it was right there on their phone. They just uploaded it when they were doing the survey. And now those are all going into one file. And then at the end of the year, when it's time to do your wrap up, you have them all in the same place. You can do the same thing in Zoom rooms. Everyone takes a picture. We put hearts on the screen, whatever it is, right? And we're asking for testimonials. What did you like about the event? We're also asking what they didn't like because we need that information. But we've made it clear that in the what did you like, we might share that information. And so in our materials, when we're saying we did this event last year, we did this event last quarter, and 90% of the people who attended said it was absolutely worth their time and they loved it, or we had a member that attended and they had this to say about it, or this was what a visitor said about one of our recent events, and we're excited to see more visitors at our events. You see where I'm going with this. Okay, so those are impact assets. And then lastly, track your impact on the external community. If y'all are doing any volunteer hours, if you're raising any donations, if you are being asked to consult on external communications, right? Maybe a press release or how they're going to show up on LinkedIn for your awareness month or whatever it might be, track that. Excellent. And now let's review some metrics that should not be on an ERG leader's plate. If anything, HR should be measuring them and collaborating with you to empower and protect your community. So many HRs are tracking employee engagement levels. And that's how we have these stats that show that when you're an ERG member, you are more likely to be more engaged at your company. Honestly, I have no idea how they're measuring engagement, but whatever. Apparently they do. Let's also make sure that they are probably tracking the long-term employee retention among ERG members. And because that's another stat that's been proven out, that when we have ERG members, they're more likely to hang around for a long time. So if they're not tracking those things, and you are concerned that your budget might be cut, or you're concerned that you might need to justify why you need the budget that you have, etc., encourage HR to start tracking these things because that's data to prove your efficacy as an ERG program. Let's also see if they can track some promotion rates. Again, this needs to be based on identity, which means people have to be willing to give their identity. But it could be really important to know if a company is looking back at all their promotions that they did in the last year and they realize they're all coming from one segment of the population, then something needs to change so that that doesn't continue to be the case. And we wouldn't know about that across an entire company unless those stats were being tracked. So as ERG leaders, you can ask your HR, are these things being tracked? Also, recruiting event representation. ERG leaders have a right to know how their community is being represented to the public. Is it always just one certain segment of the population at these events, or do we have some diversity shown? As well as hiring rates for diverse candidates. It's a sticker, right? Again, because of that identification thing, we got to have people willing to give up their identity and claim it, not give it up, claim it. But it's really important to know. I had one company, we started looking at these stats and we went back a few years and we found out that in 2023, the company had hired significantly less LGBTQ plus people than they had hired in 2019. So it was 4 years later, but we had seen a decline of about 80%. So that was a huge red flag to us, and we were able to do some digging around and found the source of the problem. But if we hadn't asked for those numbers, and if those numbers hadn't been being tracked, we wouldn't have been able to even be aware of that problem, let alone fix it. And then lastly, intersectionality. HR should be hopefully measuring keeping track of the identities that are being claimed and being able to study for intersectionality. Do we have a larger population of both people of color and disabled? Do we have a larger population of single parents who are also women? Right? So let's find that intersectionality because that might drive a lot of the programs and the groups that you might be collaborating with for the next year. Really important, can be useful. All right. Now, how do we measure these metrics? Well, I'll tell you, I've worked with so many leaders, I'll call them old school leaders, but I don't know that that's accurate, that will say, I just need them to show up. I just need my membership. They signed up to be a member. Why can't they show up to events? And I often find that when that is the case, the only metric they're tracking is event attendance. And so that's when we can start feeling like we're hitting our head against the wall as an ERG leader. So if we can back up and remember DEI, the I is inclusion. Let's include in our metric tracking every way that our members are engaging with the ERG. So can we track newsletter opens? Can we track landing page hits? Can we track, is there an electronic platform, a virtual platform like Slack? Can we track, we might have someone who never comes to a meeting for a million different reasons, but they're in the Slack group all the time, offering things and welcoming people and liking comments. Track that stuff because all engagement is valid engagement. It's not just showing up to events. Okay. Lastly, clarity in the desired impact can create clarity in the marketing. And for me, that is joyful because it is, for me, a constant slog to be coming up with the new descriptions and promoting our events and basically feeling like I'm begging people to come. I hate that energy. Whereas when I can rely on that desired impact, that thing that lights me up, then it will light me up to write that how this event is specifically driving towards that desired impact. When you're thinking, when you're creating that promotional copy, think about that desired impact and think about that member who maybe they signed up to be a part of this ERG when they were like in their social moments, right? And then later it's time to go to the event and their social anxiety kicks in hardcore. Does this sound familiar to anyone else? Because that is me. It's so hard to be responsible for the things that social me committed to. So think like that human. They are now feeling a lot of anxiety about having to go to this event. You don't have to wonder why and figure out why. But if they're having a lot of anxiety around the event, then you be ultra, ultra, ultra clear. This is what the event is for. This is what we're pursuing. This is what we'll be talking about. And this is who will be facilitating the event. Giving that information in the most clear manner possible helps to lower a lot of that social anxiety and decrease those barriers to get more of our members and our visitors to come to our events. Now, restate that desired impact both at the beginning and the end of the event. So again, it's very clear to everyone, this is why we're here. And you can pair that with a survey like we did with this event. And so when they're so clear, it's top of mind, this is what we're doing here. Okay, yep, I came here because I don't have a full understanding of that and I want to learn more. And so I'm putting myself in where I am on that sliding scale. And now I've learned something. And now before I go, I'm going to click that QR code because I remember this is the desired impact that we're trying to get to. It excites us. And I want to be able to show that this event was impactful. Hopefully that's helpful. And then a couple more before we get to the case studies. Please, leaders, you are volunteers. If you are getting a stipend, first of all, you're one of the very few that are getting a stipend, and it's definitely not enough to cover all of the energy and time that you're putting into being an ERG leader. So please, for the love of everything holy, automate everything as much as you possibly can. And keep it simple. You don't need expensive software. You don't need to learn a whole new program. Use whatever is easy for you because that's what makes it sustainable. Now, if you have someone on your committee who's like, I love this program and we can totally do it like this, and they're all excited and they'll be able to be sustainable through the whole year in that, give it to them. But if you're the one in charge of tracking these metrics, you create a system that's easy for you, period. It needs to be able to be sustainable. I just love using a Google form that asks pretty much the same questions every time. It establishes that trust and that safety. And then I make sure that I use the photos and the testimonials that are shared. I make sure that the membership knows that I hear them, that the leaders hear them. And I also love to include an option about calendar reminders for the next event or just promote the next event, get people excited for that. If you are struggling with response rates, first of all, no, that's typical. Most of the ERGs I work with, to get a 50% response rate on a QR code in a virtual event, that's pretty good. 50% is pretty good. We found that the key to increasing the response rate is, again, making sure employees feel safe to say what they want and need to say. And two, making sure they feel like it's worth the effort of sharing what they have to say. Most people's feelings, literally in America right now, is I can talk all I want, no one's listening, and nothing will change, right? That is the dominant feeling. So speak to that feeling. Speak to that feeling. And when they do share something, make sure they feel like you saw it, you read it, something will change because of it, it's being responded to. It was worth their effort to share what they had to say. That's how we can increase those response rates. All right, we got to the case studies. So we've got 2 case studies here. Let's do this. We have 2 different structures, and I did this because I wasn't sure which one you would be from, right? But all of my ERGs fall into one of these. So our autonomous structure is when we have ERGs at a company, maybe there's a committee above the ERGs, but they're not taking their cues from a set person who DEI falls on them, right? The buck stops there. So they have a lot of autonomy. They can decide all their own objectives, all their own strategies. Like, yeah, there's some give and take when it comes to budget time, but other than that, they pretty much run their own show. And then we've got an integrated ERG. So those are the ones that they have a dedicated DEI department, or they have a dedicated structure that is kind of telling them what their objectives needs to be, because we're now within a bigger structure. And so they have to kind of run their ideas by this structure, and it all kind of has to fit together, and there's more processes and systems. Okay. So you're probably one of those. So there's a case study for each of these. So in our first one, so this is the more autonomous one. They have a little more freedom. We're going to call this company Acme Agency. And again, we're going to talk about the Pride ERGs because those are the ones that are easiest for me to chat about. So they had decided on a work culture where every LGBTQ plus employee feels safe to be out to their boss if they want to be. That was the phrase and the desired impact that lit them up. That was the thing that when they imagined that, if their work culture was one where every LGBTQ plus employee felt safe to be out to their boss, that's what they wanted. That's what they were driving towards. All right. So knowing that, they picked two objectives, created strategies and metrics around them. So objective number one was they felt like they would be pursuing that impact if they could get about 50% of the leaders at that company to attend a Pride event in that year. So that became the objective. I think prior to that, they had only had 2 or 3 leaders. So I think like 5%. So the strategy, you can see the strategies that they came up with, as well as the metrics that they were going to track. So this plays into the second objective really beautifully as well. So first objective, 50% of company leaders attending a Pride event in 2023. So their second objective was, remember, they wanted a work culture where every queer employee can feel safe to be out to their boss if they want to be. So they decided their second objective was to have at least 2 active and visible ERG members in each department. So whether that's a member of the community or an ally, but in every single department, there would be 2 members that are active and visible, so that at no point in any department, an LGBTQ plus person would feel like I'm the only one in my entire department. That was the goal. They felt like that would increase that sense of safety. So they created this strategy around figuring out what departments were not represented. And they're going to host 2 events specifically for each non-represented department. Here's a little example of that number 4 strategy. So I have many companies that have large sales departments, and oftentimes the sales employees are never at any of the ERG events, not because they don't want to be, but because their time is money. They have quotas to hit, etc. So taking an entire hour out of their day that's not their lunch hour is really hard because they might not hit their quotas. So when I have an ERG that is struggling with that, like this one did, we created a series of 30-minute activity series for the sales department specifically. We actually have a queer speaker and teacher who is all about successful sales. And he led like this 3-part series. We had so many salespeople there, both LGBTQ plus people, as well as allies, as well as people that just wanted to learn some sales tips. It was one of the best activity series of the year. I think they gained a few more members from the sales department, but they were definitely able to get, by both working with the leader of the sales department, as well as creating that specific event series for the sales department, they blew away the goal of having at least 2 active members in that department. It was very cool. All right, let's put it into practice with the integrated ERG. So this is the one where they're within the entire structure. So we're going to call this company Acme Aerospace, and they have a core value of innovation. And they had decided they have a company-wide goal that started in January of 2023 of increasing innovation by 30% within 3 years. And then they told every single department that they also need to create a 3-year plan to pursue greater innovation. All right, so now we have the DEI department. So they decided that their plan is going to seek to increase innovation through 30% greater diversity and leadership within 3 years. They defined leaders as anyone who has 3 direct reports or more, and they want to see 30% greater diversity in that population within 3 years. There's a really amazing stat out there that proves out how greater diversity in leadership increases revenue and income for the company. Okay. So then the Pride ERG All right, so they're coming down the line. Now the Pride ERG has 3 desired impacts that they are pursuing towards that company goal. So they didn't really get to pick, but they are customizing it for their ERG. And they took one ERG leader, took ownership of each of those objectives. So their desired impact here is to increase their members' leadership skills, or really their promotability, because they're looking at that DEI department goal of having increasing diversity in leadership by 30%. So they're like, we want our people to be ready for those promotions and those different roles for leadership. So they did a baseline survey and they asked their members, in the last 3 years, have you applied for a promotion? How did it go? Did you get it or no? And they found out that of the people who had applied for a promotion, only 10% had gotten the promotion that they wanted. So they decided they wanted to have 70% of them get their desired promotion, which meant they were going to hold events to develop specific skills that they identified through a member survey. Their members want to work on project management skills, resume building, and soft leadership skills. Now in year 2, during year 1, they're really laying the groundwork so that in year 2, they can begin a formal mentoring program for emerging leaders within their ERG. And this includes training for the mentors. So that meaning there's a budget to train mentors how to be mentors, which is absolutely crucial in any mentorship situation. And then you can see the metrics that they tracked for that. So that desired impact, making sure that their ERG members are ready to take some of those leadership roles that the DEI department is gunning for, right? Now, their second goal was set by Acme Aerospace, the company. And I will say it is the most common goal that I see among Pride ERGs, Black ERGs, and a few others. And I'm sure you can guess it, increase LGBTQ plus allyship skills among at-large coworkers, basically increasing allyship skills. Now, this particular ERG, I will tell you, they were pretty adamant that they were not, they're required to hold 2 allyship events a year, and they were not going to do more than that because they wanted to focus on those, on the promotability skills, right? So they're going to do their 2 events, but what kind of strategy that were they going to use to pursue this desired impact that was assigned to them? So they came up with some pretty great ideas. In year 1, they collaborated with HR to select an onboard training, a virtual onboard training that teaches foundational allyship skills. So this is a required part of their onboarding because it's foundational. It's not specific allyship skills to anyone. So it's like basic human development that is needed. And then they have a vision of, in year 2, they're going to collaborate with HR to create 2 more follow-up videos that are not going to be required. They're going to be optional, but also, like, for example, the respecting pronouns video will be tied to everyone's signature who wants to. They can put their pronouns and they can put, why is this important? And then it will be a link that will take everyone back to a video that was made by and with and for the company employees, talking about why respecting pronouns is important. Now, the metrics I thought was also brilliant. Yes, they're going to track attendance at allyship events, but also they did a baseline survey at the beginning of this 3 years to find out how many negative coworker interactions their members were having based around their LGBTQ plus identity. So they did the survey over 3 months. They were able to find an average they felt good about. And now they're going to redo the survey once a year until the end of that 3 years and see if these strategies were effective in decreasing the amount of negative coworker interactions. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. I've never had an ERG pull that strategy before. It'll be interesting. Now, their final goal, they were able to set it, and it is, to me, the #1 need of every single ERG, and that is to increase their members' feeling of connection and belonging. It harkens back to that employee resource group. We don't want anyone to feel like I'm the only one in my team, on my floor, on my entire department, right? That's the point of the ERG, is so that no one has to feel that way, that they can be with their coworkers and be with their people. So They want to increase these feelings. What are they going to do? They created some strategies. First of all, let's recognize the fact, the reality that just because you're volunteered to be an ERG leader doesn't mean that you have the skills to increase psychological safety in the group that you are leading. So they asked for a budget to be able to develop some of those skills. And they started creating some regular team building activities and being really intentional about promoting the events that were going to be really great for new members or for visitors. They also worked with HR to identify and invite new employees. There's this incredible stat out there, you're going to see that at the bottom, that when the amount of purpose, connection, and belonging an employee feels by the end of their first 9 months correlates to if they are still working there 5 years later. There's an incredibly strong correlation there. And so the ERGs were working with HR around how do we retain our employees, especially our diverse employees. And so part of the strategy is HR is sending them the name and email address of every new employee. And the ERG leaders are responding to that. They're sending a personal invite to that employee, letting them know about the ERG, some upcoming activities. This is how you could get involved. Here's a really great upcoming activity for a visitor if you just want to check us out. And that membership committee will reach out to that new employee at least 3 times in that first 9 months. And that definitely helped increase that engagement and that feeling of connection and that long-term retention for the talent. So just to review, metrics are the stats used to measure the success of the strategies, not the success or the impact of the ERG. That's an entirely different conversation that needs to be had before that measurement begins. As well, and then the 4 steps: choose that desired impact, that pie in the sky, light you up, inspirational dream that you want to see happen, whether it's in your work culture or in the world. Then choose your objective, where we get specific, we get to strategize, and we don't pick too many objectives for our group, and we pick objectives that are feasibly attained if we all work together. And then step 3, making sure we're picking sustainable strategies. We're setting our people up for success, not failure, by expecting them to do too much or expecting them to do work that they hate. Let's match the projects and the assignments to their passions. And then finally, choose impact metrics that measure the strategy's efficacy and that are sustainably tracked. Automate as much as possible. I think we did it, y'all. I would love to hear from you. If you have questions for me, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, let me know you saw this video. That will move you to the head of the line, and I would love to connect with you and answer any questions that you have. Of course, I hope that you will use your phone to be able to get into this survey. It is 4 questions long. One of them is the question that you already answered, and 2 are short answers. Thank you so much for being here. I really hope this was helpful. And if I can serve you and your ERG in any way to pursue your success and your joy, you let me know. Have a great day.